All right, so let's get started. My name is Scott Knutson. I'm with Signature Home Inspection. We are located in Santa Ana, California. We've been in business for almost 20 years. I think it's 20 years in May. We started the business in Salt Lake City, was up there for about 10 years, and then sold that division and moved down here about 10 years ago. So we've been down here about 10 years. How did we get to Southern California? My parents used to live out towards Temecula and used to always come and visit. And here we are, we're in Orange County. Got tired of the snow, got tired of the winter season. And now we are here in November and it's 90 degrees. So strange weather we're having. So anyway, my company, we do home inspections. We can do commercial inspections. We do pool inspections, sewer scope inspections. We can do environmental testing, anything from air quality, mold, methamphetamine testing. We can do radon testing. So if there's some sort of testing or inspections that you need, we can either do it or we can help you find somebody that does do it. Today's class is going to be lead safety, what you as an agent should know and how to avoid liability. So we're going to go through this. So in this class, what I'd like to accomplish is one, let you know that there are cheaper methods to testing for lead. There are some really expensive ways to test for lead. If you need some kind of abatement, that's probably the route that you might have to go. But if you just want a general deal if something is lead, there are some cheaper alternatives out there. What is your role as the agent? How to avoid any liability for you? What is the best way to handle it when you find it? And then just that it is not the end of the world if it is found. I know that you will always provide a lead paint disclosure document that the EPA, I think it's just a brochure that you hand out to all homeowners or all clients that you have. So we also provide that as well in our inspection reports, so they have a copy of that. You will not learn to be an expert on lead-based paint. So this is going to kind of be an overview, give you a good idea. If you did want to do additional research, you could go to the epa.gov website, and that website has a lot of information regarding radon, mold, asbestos, lead. You can pretty much find anything that you need to find about any type of environmental hazards inside homes on that website. So again, that's epa.gov. Also, you will not be qualified to sample for lead-based paint. So keep in mind that if you do one of these cheaper tests, it's going to be kind of an FYI for your information only. You probably would not be able to use that for abatement. So if something needs to be abated, you'd have to probably have a more professional, more expensive lead-based paint test. And then also you will not be qualified to mitigate lead-based paint. So again, this is not any type of certification, anything that's going to qualify you. It's just going to be an overview again of lead-based paint, so you're more educated on it. So first of all, let's get started with the history of lead. I'm not sure how many people are well aware of lead. Every time I travel quite a bit. So every time I go over to Europe or anywhere in the country or anywhere in the world, I see these old playgrounds where you have the monkey bars that you've got the chipping paint coming off there. You've got the merry-go-round. You've got those spring-loaded, I don't know what they're called, but you get on them and you can ride them back and forth. Every time I see those, I'm just thinking, the first thing I think of is, man, look at all that lead. I wonder how many kids have gotten sick from that playground. So, and then last night I was driving my mother around. She's here visiting for a few weeks, and there was a brand new playground just around the school, corner at the school. And I'm like, that's what a playground looks like now. There's no lead-based paint on that. They've gone through and changed this. I do go back and visit where I was born from time to time, and there's playground equipment that are still there. So, that's one of the things that you would typically see. So with the history of lead, for over 2,000 years, humans have known that lead is toxic. Lead poisoning was one of the first known occupational and environmental hazards. So this is one of the first things that really got people's attention. Lead poisoning was fully documented in medical literature by the 17th century. It was recognized and documented in Australia in 1897. Lead-based paint for residential use in the 19th century introduced lead poisoning to children. So that's when we started becoming more aware of it. Prior to this, most lead poisoning was occupational. Lead paint gets phased out from the Australian experience. So France, Belgium, and Austria banned lead interior paints in 1909. So they have not been using it since 1909. The League of Nations followed in 1922. And then here we come, US bans lead-based paint for houses by 1978. Don't ask me why. I'm assuming it's kind of similar to what's happening right now. We just have a lot of red tape, and there's a lot of things that it seems like it takes longer and longer for us to, make any changes to any laws, because you've got countries like France, Belgium, Australia that are already doing it. Same with food coloring. Food coloring right now in Europe has been banned. They don't use it. I think I saw the other day that there was a cupcake shop that was utilizing sprinkles that were imported from the US, and they were being fined for using that because the sprinkles had food coloring that is banned in Europe. And the reasons why is because of health reasons. So anyway, so it's kind of, just looks at it from 1909 to 1978, you're thinking, why did it take so long for the US to ban lead-based paint? Do the math. It took the US 80 years to act on this after it was well documented overseas. Lead exposure. Let's see. All right. I just saw some questions there, so I just wanted to go through that really quick. So, all right, so let's get back here. So lead exposure goes up. So in 1920s, you had leaded gasoline. I don't know how many remember that when you used to be able to get gas, you had the option of lead and unleaded. So unleaded was something that was new. I remember as a child, I was born in 1972, so it wasn't almost 50 years ago. But I remember as a child when we'd go by the gas tank or the pumps and seeing that new unleaded gasoline, it was like, oh, that's the new stuff. And then it became premium. So you've got leaded gasoline. In the 1920s, it started to improve combustible characteristics of gasoline, but then you had lead in the exhaust. So from that, worldwide lead blood levels go up and they stay up. In the 1980s, leaded gasoline was phased out. So, if I was born in 72 and I kind of start remembering things in the 1980s, that sounds about right. It went from, you had two options. You could get leaded or you could get unleaded, and then eventually was phased out to, I believe now it's just leaded, premium, and diesel is what we see today. Blood levels have dropped dramatically since the since the 80s. Lead in canned foods. Most countries have banned the use of lead and solder in food canning. So back then, the solder was what kept the cans together, like kind of bonded them together, similar to like plumbing pipes. So a lot of times copper pipes in houses prior to the 1980s, some of that soldering, which connects the connections, would have lead in it. Phasing out leaded gasoline is the single most important reducer of blood levels in society. So just by getting rid of leaded gasoline, that was the biggest reducer of blood levels in society. What is lead-based paint? So lead-based paint, any paint or surface coatings that contain lead equal to or in excess of 1.0 milligrams per square centimeter or more than 0.5% by weight. Lead-based paint is the primary source of lead contaminated dust. It was originally added to paints for color and durability. Finally, in 1978, it was banned. This makes the year of construction important to the buyer. So as a home inspector, it's very important that we get the proper year built when we're given this information. And one of the main reasons is because it helps us date stuff. So obviously if we do our research on the back end. So if somebody calls up and they says, hey, I need a 3,000 square foot house. It was built in 1980. We get that information, but I will verify it. I'll do a Google search. I'll pull up Redfin. I'll pull up different websites. Zillow, Redfin. Some of those typically pull up the first. And I'll verify it because I want to make sure that my guys that are out in the field are aware that this house was built in 1978. As soon as we see that, then we automatically know that, hey, we need to be looking for this, or we need to make comments on lead-based paint. Another thing that was banned in 1978 was asbestos. For example, some houses have aluminum wiring, which was done between mid 60s to mid 70s. So the year of built really helps us date stuff, especially if we don't know the age of a roof. We can kind of estimate. So say, for example, if a house was built in 1980, for example, we know that probably that roof lasted 20 years, that first roof, and then we can start counting additional roofs after that. So kind of give us a good ballpark. So, but anyway, back to lead-based paint. It was banned in 1978. This makes the year of construction important to the buyer. Why was lead used in paint? Well, it was used as a pigment in yellow and white paint. White paint is the most common, or white is the most common color that we typically see in homes. Also automobiles. I don't know if you knew that or not, but white cars are the most popular color of car. But it was used in the pigment in yellow and white paint. White is, and from what I see when we're out doing inspections, is back as you know, it was kind of grays for a while, and now it's white. So I just barely repainted the inside of my house. It was a white, and it just makes everything pop. It's really bright. I painted the window frames black, and so it's who knows, maybe in a couple of years it won't be popular anymore. But white, it was used in white paint. Increases durability of the paint. So that's one of the another reasons that it was used. It resisted moisture, and it makes the paint taste better. So that's kind of a joke. So it doesn't really make it taste better. So don't go around touching the paint and licking it on your fingers. Today, lead levels are way down, but kids are still getting lead poisoning. So household paint and dust are the key route of lead exposure in children. I learned very early in my career. I remember one time I was out doing an inspection, and they had a lead-based paint company come out and test this house. And the house was built in 1920s, I think it was. And I was like, well, most likely this house is going to have lead-based paint. But the homeowner wanted to know what the extent of it was. They wanted to know how many layers had been painted over, how many layers down it was, if the outside had lead-based paint. So basically, they came in and brought in this lead detection. It's like a radon gun or I don't know. It's got an infrared on it, and they basically stick that up against the paint. The equipment is extremely expensive. I believe they're anywhere from $20,000 to $40,000 nowadays. A lot of people will ask us, why don't you guys get into lead-based paint testing? For the demand that we have and the cost, it's just not feasible. Our insurance would cost more than what we would get back on the return of doing the testing. So if anybody needs that type of testing, we would just refer that out. Household paint, dust, we got all that. Dust at wear surfaces. Dust created during renovations. Renovation activities such as sanding, cutting, and demolition can create hazards, lead, dust, and chips by disturbing lead-based paint. So back to that story, when I was in the house, he had kind of given me a clue. He goes, all right, so as an inspector, if you're ever in these houses, pay attention to the window seals. Typically the windows were down and at child level where they could walk on it, say a toddler, and say the toddler is teething, and he goes, look at that that base, the seal plate of the window, and in that seal plate in this 1920s house, you could see teeth marks from the child that, the children that had been chewing on that over the years. And that's one example of the way that this lead-based paint is getting into the children's bloodstream. So that's why it's always important to make sure that people are aware by handing out that flyer or that brochure that there is a potential that this house may have lead-based paint. And if they are concerned about it, they should ideally have it tested or at least be educated on it. New understanding. So new understanding of chronic low-level lead exposure as well as acute higher level exposure. We now know that even low levels of lead are unsafe for children. There is no known safe level. What we did not know before is that even low levels of lead in children is a serious health problem. Um, you know, it's just something you just don't really mess around with. I remember a few years ago, I don't know how many years, maybe 5, 10 years ago, where we were getting these toys from China, and the toys had lead in the paint on the toys. And we're like, really, we got to really deal with this right now. It's like, I can't remember how many of those toys were recalled, but there was lead paint that was in the children's toys. Well, the children are playing with these toys, they're putting them in their mouths, they're chewing on them, and they're getting lead paint poisoning. So the more subtle signs and symptoms are the effect it has on the children's behavior, intelligence, etc. So we now know that even low levels of lead are bad for kids, and the government is taking this very seriously. So I know some people don't like government regulations. They think they have the overreach and so forth, but there are times when they do have, our health and safety at their they're concerned about it. And this is one of the things that they, that was regulated to make sure that lead wasn't getting into our, food, water, toys, whatever we're dealing with, paint, gasoline, and so forth. There is no known safe level for children. The safe level is a level below which we are not detecting any effects at this time. The level being used is 10 micrograms of lead per deciliter of blood. And I know some of those numbers, it's probably not really much you really have to be concerned about, but just know from that last paragraph or that last slide was that there's no safe levels of lead. Health risk for small humans. So children that get lead in their bodies by putting the lead contaminating objects in their mouths, touching the lead, and then putting their fingers in their mouths may also poison them. Lead is more harmful to children because their brains and nervous systems are still developing. Lead poisoning can be treated, but any damage caused cannot be reversed. So right here, you've got this younger kid. He's scraping those window frames. Most likely they're lead. He's not doing any kind of protective mask, eyes, or anything. So right now he is being exposed to lead. Health effects for small humans. So lead-based paint, the main thing is it is dangerous. So lead affects the body in many ways: neurological, renal, digestive, and reproductive systems. Also causes learning disabilities, attention deficit disorder, and decreased intelligence. Speech, language, and behavioral problems, decreased muscle and bone growth, hearing damage, memory and concentration deficiencies, muscle and joint pain, and kidney dysfunction, seizures, and coma, and anemia and high blood pressure. Did you know that amount of lead that could be contained in a sugar package is enough to contaminate a 15,000 square foot home? So one of those small sugar packages that you get at Starbucks or wherever you get your coffee is enough to contaminate a 1,500 square foot house. That's how toxic it is. How does lead-based paint affect pregnant women? So lead poisoning is caused by breathing or swallowing lead. Lead can pass from a mother to her unborn baby. I know that seems, I guess it doesn't seem that weird, but I remember my first child, me and her mom, we're not together anymore, but her mom, I remember the day after the baby is born, or the night the baby is born, I had this idea. It's like, hey, let's go get a pizza. Because everybody was busy. And so we got home and I'm like, all right, ordered a pizza, not knowing that the spiciness of that pizza and the sausage and stuff was being passed from my wife to the child. And I'm like, well, that makes, doesn't make sense at all. And I didn't understand at the time, but if you think of it that way, that's kind of the same way it is with lead-based paint. Too much lead in your body can put you at risk for miscarriage, cause your baby to be born too early or too small, hurt your baby's brains, kidneys, and nervous system, cause your child to have learning or behavioral problems. So the takeaway on this is, I think in our transactions, as far as real estate goes, is if your client brings this up as a concern, do not sweep it underneath the rug. Do not try to say, oh, it's not that big of a deal. If they're bringing it up, they have a concern about it. For example, yesterday, we were hired to go out and do some mold air testing at a brand new construction in Costa Mesa / Newport Beach. I didn't see anything. I don't think their house had any kind of mold, but the client had rented an apartment at one time that had mold, and it made her extremely sick. And she just wanted to be put, she just wanted to have that peace of mind that they would had it tested, that they weren't going to have any issues with it, and that she didn't want to go through that again that she went through in that apartment that they lived in. So, and good on her. If that made her feel better, she was willing to spend the money to have that type of testing. I wouldn't discourage it. You really don't want to open yourself up to liability. I also say that to clients that if we're out doing an inspection. For example, we did one in Laguna Beach yesterday, and Laguna Beach is known for post and piers construction. And the first, I kind of I was there a little bit late. I had my team there. I got there a little bit late, but the one thing that I was concerned about was before I even got there was that I wanted to make sure that we checked that foundation as good as we could check it, because I know in that area that they have some issues sometimes. And so with that, the client had asked me, as soon as I got there, had asked me, the first thing they asked, have you seen any structural problems? And I just said, I don't know yet. I haven't looked at it, but that's what I'm here to look for. And so, and I told them, I said, if you have questions or if you have concerns, I said, and you obviously do, I would recommend that you have further evaluation if you are that concerned about it. Because a structural inspection, we can do a visual, but we're not construction, we're not structural engineers, we're not licensed contractors. So I just said, if that's something that you're concerned about, you might want to have that further looked at. So we can report what we can see, but at the same time, we would recommend you having that. So kind of the same thing, if they bring it up and they're concerned about it, I would just, refer them off to say, well, you can have it additional tested if you needed to. But at the same time, I would probably let them know that, let them know, say, well, you know what, the house was built before 1978. There's probably a good chance that it has lead-based paint, but it's probably been painted over several times since then, and it's been encapsulated. So you can always, approach it that way. How widespread is lead-based paint in the houses we sell? So the year the house was built, have it. And then the percentage. So before 1940, 87% of the houses will have lead-based paint somewhere inside the house. Between 1940 and 1958, 69%. And then 1960 to 78, 24%. And then 1978 to 1980. And why do you say 1980? Well, since if it was banned in 78, the issue with that is that you would have, contractors and painting companies that probably had some in storage that they still needed to rotate through. It's kind of like a grocery store with paint, with furnaces, with AC units. Sometimes the house construction will say 2000, but we'll get there and the AC unit will be 1999. So as people say, well, why is the unit older than the house? Well, probably the builder had a big warehouse and they just, rotated it through. So what they do is when they have new product, they'll move it in the back and then, kind of like I said, at the grocery store. So if you're ever at the grocery store and you want the freshest produce, you want the freshest milk, reach all the way in the back because they're rotating it through. So I never did that, but my ex-wife used to always do it. So now I'm in the habit of doing it. Makes sense. All right, the federal strategy. Because of the shocking data and the new understanding of lead poisoning, the federal strategy was born. So basically eliminating childhood lead poisoning, a federal strategy targeting lead paint hazards. Children's Task Force on Environmental Risk and Safety Risks to Children, and that was in February of 2000. So basically, act before children are poisoned. Federal grants for low-income housing were installed or implemented. So if they had low-income housing and they were built before 78, they had some grants where they could use to get rid of or encapsulate the lead-based paint. Leveraged private and other non-federal funds to control lead paint hazards. And also promoted education for universal lead safe painting, renovation, and maintenance work. And then also ensure compliance and enforcement of lead paint laws. So, if you're ever having any kind of lead paint abatement, and I mean, it is like a environmental hazard when they are in there getting rid of it. So if there are lead paint, and you have a house that has lead-based paint, do not do what that kid was doing in their earlier photo. You really need to contain those areas, because when you're scraping it off like that, especially inside the house, you're just now getting the dust particles in the air, and it's going and landing on other surfaces. It's getting in the ductwork. You really need to take this serious if you're going to have it abated. Federal strategy continued: identify and care for lead poisoned children. And then also conducted research, improved prevention strategies, and then they measured progress and refined prevention strategies. So lead was used for many things over the years. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this. Look at the 1980s. So this is just a, I don't know what this is called. I see these quite a bit in Europe, where they will have, it's like a well, and just a container. So I don't know if they were using this to, to get their water out of, or if it was a cattle trough or what it was. But you also, lead was used in tire weights. So tire weights are what keep your tires balanced. So if you've ever taken your tires in to have them rotated and balanced, they put those little weights on. The problem with that is those weights will fall off. They fall off as you're driving, and they get onto the side of the road, and then they get into the water, and then we've got issues. Shots and bullets. Several years ago, they stopped putting lead in shot and bullets. So basically, if you're a duck hunter and you are out hunting ducks and you've got the pellet spray from the bullet, a lot of that had lead paint. So what would happen is that when you shot those up in the air and you didn't hit something, they would fall back to the ground, back into the water, and then you've got lead in the water. Also, if you did hit the bird, or you nicked the bird, say a couple of them hit the bird still survived, the bird ends up getting eaten by I don't know, raccoon or a mountain lion, or whatever eats the bird. They're going to have, once they've eaten that, now it's in that animal. So it's kind of a chain that happens with this stuff. Solder for plumbing pipes. This is something that we would see before the 1980s. If we are inside of a house that was built before 1980 or in the 80s, I think it's 86, we make a note of it if we see copper piping with the soldering, because there's a good chance that there might be lead in that solder. And I'll have a picture of the solder later on. Water and drain lines for plumbing in your house. Batteries. We'll have pictures of this when we come up here. Gasoline for cars, we already talked about that. And then anything else. So let's go through this. So lead examples, kind of explained that earlier. So these are the tire weights here on your tires. And again, like I was saying before, these would pop off from time to time, and then they're just on the side of the road. They get in the ditch, they get in the rivers, the streams, and now all of a sudden you're getting lead in your water. Let's see here. You've got shots and bullets. This is what I was talking about before. You've got the lead tips here. You've got the lead shot. Again, when these are loaded in a shotgun shell and shot up in the air, if they have lead in it, again, it can get into the water source. It can get into the animals. The animals die. Another animal eats the animal, and then they get into that animal. It's just kind of a never. So here's the solder that I was talking about before. This is a common way that you would join the connect the pipes together, is where you would stick these two tubes in here, and then you have the joint, and then they solder around that, and that seals that. So not used today, but this was used in the 80s. Here's some water and drain lines that had lead in them. So here's your old galvanized piping, drain lines. This is common back in the day. Batteries had lead in them. Oh, these are old. So this is kind of what I was talking about before. You've got a picture. This is when you had the old leaded, and then here is the new improved unleaded. So it finally phased out leaded. But I remember like I said, I remember when unleaded gasoline came out, and it was like, I don't want to say it confused anybody, but it was more expensive, and so still people gravitated to the lead until they eventually phased out leaded, and then everything went to unleaded. And now I think it's premium gasoline. So, and then diesel. So these are some of the old pumps that you would see back then. There are 3 types of lead-based paint testing. So EPA recognized test kits. Those are the cheapest. Those are color metric, change color when lead paint is present. Intrusive, damages the surface tested. You have X-ray fluorescence testing. That's the most costly. That's what I was talking about earlier with that X-ray gun. Those type uses gamma radiation to cause lead-based paint to glow. Very costly due to the cost of training and the equipment. Like I said, I think the equipment, when I was looking at it a few years ago, it was like $15,000 just for a used gun. And now I think minimum is 20 to 40 in that range. And then you've got to have the training, you got to have the insurance. And so it's not something that's you're going to see most home inspectors be able to offer. It's just not something that we would get our money back on. Paint chip collection, most common in our world. So if you suspect that you have lead-based paint, you can always take a paint chip from it, and you can take that down to a local lab if you needed to. That's intrusive. All paint layers are removed for testing. So if you are going to do that type of testing, you would basically have to cut down to the surface. Like say, for example, if it's the seal plate, you would have to cut down into the wood and get all levels, because there might be 5 layers of paint over that. You want to make sure you get them all. And then that's sent to an EPA approved lab for analysis. Here's an example of that cheap one. The test kits can be purchased from Amazon, and your client can test. These are just these little pins that they can basically rub on the surface, and if it changes their color. I think you can get these at Home Depot and Lowe's and Ace Hardware as well. They have these, maybe not the same brand, but they got different kinds. X-ray fluorescence. You can see the gun there. That's probably that's an old picture, so they're probably more high tech than that now. Measures the characteristic X-rays emitted from a sample after it's been bombarded with high energy radiation. This method is by far the best way. It is very non-invasive, but it does cost the most. On average, to test this way is about $1,200. Again, this slide is probably 5 years old, so it's probably gone up since then. I'll probably change that or give a call around and see what the new one is. I'm on my iced coffee today, by the way. I had coffee this morning, had to drive to Corona to do some environmental testing, and for some reason I'm tired today. So if I'm not as chirpy as I normally am, I got to get that coffee in me. So, all right. So paint chip sample. So you take a smaller sample of the paint. It is kind of destructive. Turnaround time can be a week or more. Cost is kind of high. It's 150 to 175 per sample or more. So if you're going to take different rooms, if you're going to say, okay, I want to take the outside of the house, I want to take the kitchen, and I want to take the master bedroom, you're looking at 3 samples. So you could get up into $1,000 pretty quickly if you're going to take multiple samples. This is the most common way for a real estate transaction. So I know that here in Orange County and LA County, there's a lab called LA Testing. I think they are located in Huntington Beach, and there's one in Pasadena. I believe they will do this type of testing. So if you do need to do this type of testing, I would reach out to them first. Again, that's called LA Testing. There's a location in Huntington Beach and Pasadena. Less liability for you, the agent, and for the client. Okay, the testing comes back positive. Now what? Is this what your buyer wants to see? So no, you probably don't want to see that. So the RP rule, getting the EPA involved. So EPA's renovation, repair, and painting rule. Renovators must be certified through training. Make sure to use certified firms. Certification is only good for 5 years. So make sure you have the most recent certification certificate, because if they get certified and they don't renew it, then they're not certified. You'd want to verify that they are certified through the state and EPA's website. Unfortunately, the cost is extremely high if you want to abate the lead. It can take months to complete the cleanup. It can discourage the buyer from moving forward with the contract. So if you've got somebody that's concerned about lead-based paint, I would just try to do your best to give them the information that they need so they can make an educated decision on it. And then I'm sure that there's waivers out there if they don't want to test for it or what have you, that they've got to sign. Understand the options. So you've got a few options here. So EcoBond LBP. So you can paint it on, leave it on. It's patent specialty paint, primer, and sealant product. Seals and treats lead dust and lead-based paint, providing environmental and enhanced safety protection. Multi-purpose, low cost, high coverage rate, specifically designed to provide broad lead-based paint solutions. So you can do this for 25 cents. What's this standard? Is it a square foot or something? So typically $250 to $300. Encapsulants provides a barrier between the lead paint environment. Generally, a thick product requiring multiple coats. This is what I was saying earlier, is a lot of times people will just encapsulate over it. So if you have a house that was built in 1940, most likely it's got lead-based paint, and it's probably has 7 coats of paint over it by then. So again, unless the children are actually chewing on it and digging into those coats of paint, they're probably okay on it. Paint strippers, liquid or paste, often caustic, used to remove paint from a surface. Paint removal is costly, time intensive, and creates hazardous waste, then would require a primer or sealant. I've got some stairs that have metal railings. My house was built in 2007, so no issues there, but I just wanted to paint it from gray to black, and it has nothing to do with the lead-based paint, but I know the paint removal to get that old paint off was time consuming, and the cost was more to paint the railings because of that. So there's more labor involved with it. Standard latex paint, easy to apply. Conventional latex paint is not specifically designed for sealing or treating lead-based paint. So typically, if you're going to use standard latex paint, you're going to put that over the encapsulants and the EcoBond. I can fix that. So all repairs made by the homeowner do not have to follow the EPA's guidelines. Homeowners can do the work themselves and save a lot of money. 95% of the time, the lead-based paint can be encapsulated. So like I was saying earlier, you can encapsulate it and paint over it. Most products can be purchased at Home Depot, Lowe's, or Ace Hardware, or your local home goods store. This is found at Home Depot. You've got the EcoBond, the lead defender. So we were talking about this earlier. This is something that they can do. So now includes Bitrex, a bitter tasting additive to discourage oral contact. So it's actually, it's got some flavoring in it. So it's bitter, so the kids don't want to chew on it. Bottom line, what you need to know as an agent needs to know. Be aware of the date of construction. We talked about that earlier. 1978 is key on a lot of this stuff. Like I said, you've got, I'll give you a few. So typically, if you were going to have aluminum wiring in a house, that's between 1965 and 75 in that range. And the reason why, and I know we're getting off of lead-based paint, but the reason why some houses had aluminum wiring in it is because during the Vietnam War, there was a shortage of copper. And so they started using aluminum. What happens is aluminum's not as good of a conductor as copper, so it heats and contracts a lot more, and it can cause a spark. So that's why they don't use aluminum wiring anymore. The solid gauge, the braided they still use. It's not an issue, but it's the solid gauge aluminum. 1978 was when they phased out lead-based paint and asbestos. And then as far as GFCIs, there's various years in our reports. When we talk about GFCIs, those are the outlets that have the kill switches on them, or the red buttons that shuts the power off. They phased it in from, you had to have them around bathrooms, and then they started a few years later, wanted them in kitchens, and then a few years after that, they wanted them in garages, and then a few years after that, they wanted them on the exterior. So in our reports, if we ever see any outlet, we'll put that in there so they know the dates. So that's pretty much it. So if there's any questions, feel free to put those in chat or question and answer. Here's my contact information as promised. Again, our company's name is Signature Home Inspection. Phone number 888-860-2688. If you need to order an inspection or you haven't tried us out, feel free to go online. I've got a lot of information. I've got a lot of blog articles. I've got a lot of maintenance videos. I've got some trusted contractors on there. You can actually place a order 24/7 on our website, where you can pick the time, you can pick the inspector, you can pick the date, or if you want a copy of this presentation, you can feel free to reach out to me. Again, my name is Scott Knutson. My email is Scott@signaturemore.com. If you want a copy of this, I can send you a copy of it. Like I said, if you just have any questions, let me know. If your office wants any of these presentations, we'd be happy to come in and teach any of these classes. But utilize this. We're local here for you. So if you have any questions, just let us know. Otherwise, thanks everybody. Oh, I'm going to answer your questions. Hold on one sec. All right. We don't, oops, that's for them. Questions and answers. So a house built in 1978 may use a lead paint. Correct. Yep, 1978 is the key. So just because it was built in 78 doesn't mean that it still might not have, it still could have lead paint in it. So we need to advise the buyers to do lead paint testing for all houses before 1980. No, you don't have to advise them anything. You should have, I believe it's required that you have to hand out a lead-based paint pamphlet. If you don't have that, get with your broker, because I believe that is a requirement. So we need to advise buyers. Let's see. Yep. So no, you don't have to advise them to do anything. You just have to hand them that pamphlet. My understanding. If I'm incorrect, just somebody say that, but that's my understanding, is that there's a pamphlet that you give them that refers to lead-based paint. As long as you give that to them, then you should be fine. But double check with your broker on what they recommend. All right. Anything else? Let me know. Reach out to me. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.